Hi, my name is Jacqueline Garcia, and this is my project for the Human Development Infancy. I named it The Wonders of Infancy, and in the PowerPoint at the right bottom corner, there's a little number, and you could follow along with me on the slide. Right now, we're on slide number 2, which is the introduction. Here, I introduce the brain, which is an organ that governs our actions, our emotions, our sensations, and abilities. It's something that with time develops and helps us communicate, gives us a sense of who we are, and the development of neurons start as soon as the baby is born. Now we are on slide 3, and this is where I talk about the growth spurts. So as I mentioned, there is rapid growth in the size of neurons, the number of glial cells, and any connection that the brain has to do. There's also plasticity, which I believe this occurs as you are growing and experiencing, because this means that the brain can be modified by something that happened to you. For example, let's say you went through something that traumatized you. Now, because of that, anything in the future that relates to that situation or anything that reminds you of that is going to affect the way you think. And this goes along with habituation method, which is the perceptual capabilities. It's certain stimuli for the infant. It's the way the infant responds to certain things and any behavioral capabilities as well. Now we are on slide number 4, and this is where we start talking about the sensomotor, which is where the infant starts to connect and understand the world by coordinating sensory expectations and experiences with physical connection. This usually happens from birth to age 2. And then we have pre-operational stage, which this is where the child begins to speak and connect with images. For example, let's say that the child sees a piece of food, right? It's gonna go like, point at it or cry to get it or call mom's attention to get it. And that usually is from ages 2 to 7. And then we have concrete operational stage, which is where now the child can understand logical reasoning about events and they can classify objects. For example, this can be that a child begins to remember that, let's say, every Tuesday they have swimming lessons, right? They understand every Tuesday now, because it's swimming lessons, they're going to know that that is Tuesday. Same thing with school. If they do start going to school, they're going to know when the week is and when the weekend is not, because during the week they go to school, so they know it's a weekday. But if they're not in school, then they're going to know that it's a weekend, right? And then we have our formal operational stage, where this is where they're more into the adolescent stage and they begin to think more abstract and a lot more logical. Now we are in slide number 5, and here I just have a little chart, as you can see, that just shows milestones from birth to sensory to motor language to higher cognition. And then we're on slide 6, which this kind of gives us just an overview of how the development actually happens. And I created a little table that shows from ages. So for example, from age 0 to 4, the eyes focus more. Say, for example, they follow the mom around. The mom is in the room with them and the mom is doing things around the house. They begin to follow the mom. And at this age, they also begin to discover their fingers and their hands, and they begin to recognize people and they begin to smile to people. And then we have months 5 to 8. And this is where they develop fine motor skills and gross motor skills. And they begin to play games such as peekaboo. They begin to crawl. They begin to see things and it catches their attention more. And from 9 to 12, they begin to do things such as drinking from a cup, more social games. They begin to stand, they begin to walk, whether it's grabbing on or holding onto things or actually giving their first step. And then we have 13 to 18 months, which here they begin to stack blocks. For example, they begin to put the little triangles. How there's games that have triangles, squares, circles. They begin to put them in the places that they belong. They can walk around with no support. They may be able to climb stairs. And from 19 to 24 months, They begin to jump, landing on both feet without falling. They begin to throw a ball. They begin to get on tricycle, use toys that are meant for an older age. And they begin to be more excited about a certain environment. Say, for instance, they now know and they now understand when you're going over to, say, their cousin's house. And because they enjoy being there, they get all excited. They get excited to go. Or say after a very long day, the baby is tired, it wants to go home. And when it gets home, it gets happy. They begin to connect to their environment and places they want to be, places they enjoy. And now we're moving on to more physical changes. And on slide 7, I have a little chart that kind of shows images of the baby growing up to be an adolescent. And these are just some quick little features that you can see. So for instance, in the first 4 months, you know, the baby starts gaining weight. Little hairs are starting to be replaced by permanent hair. They no longer have their baby skin. You know how when they're born, they look really pink and almost transparent. They begin to get more blood in their flesh, thicker skin. You know, they're still very fragile in senses of their brain. So, for example, shaking a baby really hard can mess up their brain, or if they have an accident and fall, it could really hurt their bones because they're still very fragile. And then from 5 to 8 months, they begin to have thicker hair. Their eyes get to enlarge more. They begin to just grow, you know. And then from 9 to 12 months, they get about 3 times heavier than the last time. And they can start standing up straight and start taking their steps. And then from 13 to 28, usually this is where the weight kind of slows down. You know how at first a baby is skinny and small and then they tend to get chubby and big? That's because they're eating, their body is learning to process all the nutrients that it's receiving. You know, they're eating a lot in order for them to grow. And then that's when the weight slowly, not necessarily decreases, but the body kind of comes to a sense of like, okay, this is my healthy spot, this is my healthy place. And they learn to do simple things such as feeding themselves. And then from 19 to 24 months, you know, this is where they have their teeth now. They usually begin to bite if you don't teach them not to bite. You know, these were just small physical development changes. And now we get to social changes. And I also made another little table. This is on slide 8. And here we go by age, developmental milestone, and description. So my first one was by 3 months, they become calm, they become attentive, and they become interested in the world. Everything they see, they want to put in their mouth, right? And my description for that was that they start becoming social. They start recognizing who holds them, who feeds them, who's there with them if it's not their mother, you know? And they begin to trust people and be comfortable around them. And then by 5 months, they learn to fall in love. You know, they recognize familiar figures, familiar faces. They direct their attention to certain caregivers who they feel comfortable with, who they like. For example, if you treat a baby good, basically, if you give it food, it's going to love you, you know? Next time it sees you, it's going to be like, oh, she gave me food. Let me go with her. Maybe she'll give me food again, right? And they also find the human world pleasing and exciting, you know? And by the 14th and the 18th month, they can start to become a two-way communicator. So this means that they begin to either notice dialogue between, say, for instance, the mom and the dad, or they begin to talk and want to communicate with them. This can either be by words or by murmurs, but they know what talking is. They know that if they talk to you or somehow, you're going to talk to them back. You know, instead of, it becomes more than just physical, like, attraction. Now it's more like language attraction. They want to be able to communicate you on another level. And by the 36 to 48 months, they begin to build bridges. This means that they begin to notice that their behavior has a price, you know? They begin to see. They also begin to manipulate. For example, they can cry to make you feel bad and say like, oh, I have to give my baby food, or oh, my baby wants a toy, let me give it to him, you know? But they begin to know that, and they they modify their behavior to meet those expectations. So they kind of understand when no, it's no. Or they kind of understand when they're doing something bad and you told them to stop. This is where they start realizing those things. They start setting and recognizing rules and goals for themselves. And then on on slide 9, I start talking about attachment. Okay? And attachment is known as a bond between the children and someone who's very close to them. In most cases, the first attachment is obviously with the mother, right? Because that's the first person that they know. And an attachment has to be built up by sharing experiences that are ongoing. And attachment is important because it can impact the infant's psychological development, whether it be in a good way or in a bad way. And we're going to get to that when we talk about types of attachments, and there are many attachments, like I mentioned, good and bad. Right, so in slide number 10, we talk about types of attachments. The first one is secure attachment, which is literally what the word means, secure. It's a really strong bond that the caregiver develops with the baby. The baby feels secure. The baby enjoys being with the caregiver. And then we have avoidant attachment, which this is insecure attachment that is characterized by ambivalence and toward the mother. So this means that the baby doesn't feel secure, and it could be caused by many things. For example, let's say one day the mom is having a bad day, right? And the baby's crying. The baby doesn't stop crying. She screams at the baby, or she screams and the baby hears. The baby feels the change in tone, the change in the way the mother is feeling, and now the baby doesn't feel secure. It might do different things. It might not ask for food anymore. It might react, And then we have insecure attachment, which this goes beyond avoidance. So this is a fragile emotional bond between the child and the caregiver that is often developed because there's no care given. For example, again, what if the mother develops a depression because the baby was born? Mothers go through different things. And let's say that the mom is not there for the baby. Let's say the mom is afraid to feed the baby. Let's say the mom is afraid to hold the baby. All of this impacts the baby because